I'm delighted to welcome Ryan Young to the show today. I just want to tell you a little bit about him. Ryan Young is a private investor who is launching a project to build a franchise model of sustainable communities. And these communities will function in a decentralized, fully supportive ecosystem. And the project is being built on the premise of empowerment for people and bringing back health and freedom into our world, which sounds absolutely amazing. Really lovely to see you, Ryan. And please tell me more about this, because it's just what we need, everything you're talking about.
Yeah, so the idea kind of came initially from back when I was 19. I had wanted to set up like a chain of wellness centers that could really change the paradigm of health from the kind of pharmaceutical approach we're utilizing now back to a more natural approach, or just, make alternative medicine a more mainstream form, right? That over the course of time, because I went to massage school, then I was in the military, and after the course of time seeing of just a lot of stuff that's been going on, that developed into a fully sustained community model, because I was looking at different groups that were kind of like off grid or in these sustainable communities, or doing like eco-friendly activities, and I was like, what if? But everything seemed very isolated, or they were focused on one specific thing, and everything was very fringed out. There wasn't much communication within the networks, or if there was like a network, it was like a cult. There's like, so it's still in this isolated fashion, and most people want the benefits of what they offer without having to be stuck into some like religious belief, or they'd rather just believe what they want to believe, in their private time, instead of being forced. So I was like, how do we bring these concepts for sustainable living, off-grid type living, decentralized living to the mainstream without having that overarching kind of fear mentality or cult mentality? So the idea I'd come up with was launching a model, like a template model that we could build that could be a franchise that people could come into. Landowners and developers could partner together to build out sustainable communities. What we have currently right now is a proprietary housing material, water machines that don't connect to any centralized water source. We have our own aeroponic systems for like the farming component, as well as we want to turn our natural farms back into biodynamic or regenerative farming. And then were you gonna say something?
No, I was going to ask you something. You carry on.
In addition to that, we have a financial component that allows an economic circulation through the communities, which will sustain it even in case of a currency collapse, which is something we're dealing with. The inflation rates in America, I'm not sure what's going on.
Oh, just the same.
So it's something we're seeing right across the world. What they're doing, what's being done, we'll say, is a crash of fiat systems so they can introduce digital systems, which the way I look at it is kind of like the Force in Star Wars. The digital system is not bad. It's the way it's being used. A digital system, because we already use it with debit cards, credit cards, stuff like that, right? A digital system is highly efficient, very quick, and could expedite the development of our economic growth if it's done in a decentralized fashion, if it's done in a centralized.
Yeah, and that's what I want to ask you. I just want you to, because not everybody is really clear what is meant by centralized and decentralized. Can you explain what that is?
So in simple terms, basically centralized is you have your central banks that control the currency and dole out the currency. Decentralized is more like an empowerment of the people, kind of like the way you see Bitcoin functions. What it is, and I'm not repping Bitcoin, but Bitcoin was the first one to come out as the first blockchain to really introduce the concept. Rather than everything being stored in a central location, it's sent out through different computers or servers or networks, and the information is actually held in the blockchain across all the different servers. So you can't collapse it from one central node because they're popped up everywhere. On that concept, that's the idea of the communities. When you franchise out and they populate everywhere, you have a decentralized system of community living, right? Now you can have a heading of it, like, so the way I established it was as a corporation heading, because we need a powerful corporation in the game right now that's going to compete with the corporations that are leveraging powers against the people. We need big players to move the money back into the hands of the people so that we can reestablish the way we do everything. But when people are like, well, we need to just change stuff, we do, but it takes a process. And you can do it in an empowered state the whole time. But when you want to change the whole world, when people say the problem's so big, it's global, what do I do about it? You start local. That's one of the biggest concepts behind it is we can start local, but all over the place at the same time.
So tell me what you mean by, so I've got a clearer idea about decentralized. So decentralized is much more for ordinary people. It gives, what you're saying, gives power back to the people. So how do you start small? Give me an example of how you would start something like this locally in your own community and help it sort of, expand in the right way.
So the way my project of making it available for people was creating the template for them, giving them access to those sustainable materials. For people that are just wanting to start communities, it can be a little difficult because that's been the issue we've been running into is people, it's such a great idea. Like, I really want to start a community. I want to find like-minded people. That's a big undertaking. That was why I started doing it. What we're doing is here in Florida, I'm in the United States. In Florida, we're launching the template model called the proof of work model. Here's how it is. We have about 10 homes on there. Here's how the whole concept works. Once we show that, we bring more investors on board. We scale it up. We launch a template that you can basically purchase into or whatever, like any franchise, except it's scalable too. So you could have big multi-million-dollar houses. You could have smaller houses for affordability for people so that you can start just making it accessible to everybody.
Okay, so you're talking first of all about houses because you've got their whole load of. I mean, it sounds as if it's wanting to change the world, which I think is fantastic. But but you're talking about houses at the moment. So tell me a little bit. How does that work? You've got 10 houses in this particular structure, this template. Then what happens? What does that mean? Does that mean somebody can go to you and buy a house? Does it mean? Explain a little bit more.
So we would set them up. This could be an ever evolving concept, but essentially what it is we're changing the way. So like you would live in a neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
We're watching neighborhoods get developed all over the place. What we're doing is we're trying to take that market space and start developing neighborhoods in a more communal way.
Yeah.
Which is so, and then the houses are built with that like eco-friendly material. We have a proprietary material that has the strength of steel, but it's rust resistant. And there's a bunch of other features that we could go into about it, but it's eco-friendly. So what it would be is, and then I'm sure, have you heard of like community supported agriculture programs? So groups of people will get with like a local farmer.
Right.
I don't know. My phone is connected to my computer and then it dings in through. Community supported agriculture is people being able to buy from local farmers so they know where they're getting their produce. So building these homes on farms or adjacent to a farming component, like an agriculturally zoned area, allows us to have the people have a supportive agricultural component or a community supported agriculture system, but then even overproduce outside of the communities so that it generates revenue for the communities as we produce for the outside world. So what we're doing is by making more and more of those, populating those everywhere, we are actually making biodynamic or regenerative farming the standard practice again, which will reevaluate the market, meaning now organic food, non-GMO food, all the trigger words, the fun ones. Now, instead of that being super expensive, the market's reevaluated because we're the overproduction asset. It's no longer.
Oh my God. And that is so much what we want. It is so completely crazy that organic food is so expensive when all it means is it doesn't have the pesticides. It isn't messed up. So I'm in, as you said, I'm in a neighborhood and it's established, and it's been established for, the houses around here, British houses, 1930s. It's so 90 years of establishment. So what you're doing is basically trying to create a new model for these communities. Do you have any ideas about what we can do when we're in established neighborhoods? Because I notice in the city that I live in, there are some areas where people really know each other. The neighbors go in and out of each other's houses. And where I am, they don't. They really don't. Nobody is interested in communal, not saying communal living, that's the wrong word, but they're not really interested in connecting with each other, which is such a shame.
Well, I mean, the model I'm working off of is not necessarily trying to change the established things
Yeah,
that we
I
have
know.
right now, but that will happen over time.
Yeah,
But what I'm doing is I'm working with new development because there's a lot of unused land. One of the things we're seeing in America is land owners are losing their land because they can't afford it anymore. It's being bought up by outside entities,
right.
which and then for farmable land, like let's say it was a farmer, that's being turned into non-reproducible land. That's causing pretend food shortage
Yeah,
crises amidst the shipping containers and all that other nonsense. But what they're doing, what I'm alluding to, is that they're taking away our actual internal resources and assets. And what this will do is leveraging the land that hasn't been developed on yet.
right. Yeah,
And but doing it in more eco-friendly ways. So we're not just always, because one of the biggest things is people are like, well, we don't want to develop on all the land. True, we don't, but we do still want to be developing. We just want to do it in more sustainable ways. That's why we want to develop this new model so that it's no longer an issue or we're, destroying things.
so if you and the idea being that if you, because it would be fantastic if you could get a model that really starts working and it starts becoming a big thing, and then eventually, as you say, I mean, the situation I'm in where I can't change my neighborhood as myself, but it'd be wonderful if that becomes more the norm,
That
and
becomes
then the established communities start going, actually, what do we need? We're missing out.
we're missing out. Yeah, they'll start losing market share
Yeah,
because people will be incentivized to do a better thing,
yeah,
as opposed to telling people don't do this anymore. We're just showing, look, how much you benefit by doing this. It's
yeah.
positive reinforcement. Um, so that became the new mindset. And the reason that I wanted to go with that approach was because I looked, 2020, 2021, there was a lot of negative alternative media coming out, all the control and mandates and just different things, right? And a lot of fake stuff too. You couldn't even tell what was true at the end of the day, which is a tactic, by the way, to make it so convoluted that the average citizen becomes just disillusioned with the entire thing and they retract, but then they become complacent and do nothing. That's why I turned it all off. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter what they're doing. They're doing it. Fine. You want to know a little bit about it? Fine. But make sure that you're always putting more effort and attention into the positive reinforcement of what you're doing to make a change.
I think the last couple of years, I mean, the whole COVID crisis has just been such a wake-up call for so many people. And I think it's made a lot of us realize how we really do need to do something. And for me personally, there's been so much, it's been so dark, it's been so heavy, it's been so depressing and restrictive, and all the things that we don't need to talk about. But one of the things that has saved me is just thinking, okay, what, like exactly as you're saying, but in my version of it, what can I do to
Right.
really create something that is going to be of value? And for me, this channel, which is what this channel is all about, how can we create a world that is going to be really good for our children to grow up in? That's what I'm really, how can we lift and enable the children of the future to really, well, the children of now, to become the leaders and the adults of the future, to live lives that are healthy and empowered and all of those things.
Step one, you can't teach empowerment if you're not empowered yourself. So reestablishing that mindset is the first step, right?
Yeah.
Once we do that, that becomes something that you have then ingrained in you. It becomes a part of your lifestyle. Then you inevitably teach that to your children. One of the components we want to put into the communities as we establish them out is build out a charter program, a schooling, Montessori in nature, which we talked about before. I'd looked at a bunch of different models. It doesn't necessarily have to be Montessori, but I really like that style because what it does is it allows the child through creative processes to learn, but without getting so far lost in that just the creative aspect that we lose the academic rigor. I like that. I love structure. I love academic rigor, but you can't, it's become almost to the point where that's taken over and there's no creativity left. And then it's gotten to the point where we're not even really learning essential things. We don't know how to do anything anymore. We don't know how to take care of ourselves anymore. In Montessori, back the high schools, they had a whole farming component. You had to like run your own farm basically as the student. So you learned these life skills which are necessary, but then you would go in kind of like STEM programs, you would develop into your own specialty. So you still have context of the full, fullness of an educational program. But what we're seeing now is like a usurpation of it, and almost being indoctrinated.
Yeah, yeah.
And so no life skills. Yeah.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, if we look back through history, I think education has flipped backwards and forwards. So it's become ridiculously strict. And then it becomes, a period of time, it becomes so free flowing that nobody knows what to do. And it's almost over creative, but in the wrong kind of way. And a sort of, without the structure. I mean, there always needs to be a container. There always needs to be structure in order that there can be creativity.
Right. So that's it's like a coloring book, right? You have the lines, you color in the lines, but you pick the colors you want. So have that creative flow, paint the picture you want, but don't just throw paint on the canvas. At least not all the time. Some days, sure. Wild Friday or whatever, I don't know, but.
And then maybe to take your analogy one step further, I don't know whether this quite works, is you start by, the children will start by coloring in, choosing their colors. And then later they start to learn how to actually create a painting, but they have to learn a different sort of structure, which is much more, it's different. There's a lot more to it.
And that's what we're wanting to do is, I'm not creating this educational program. That would be odd to start with communities and then create that program. I want to outsource and bring in the experts, the people who have been working with Montessori or other similar programs, and really develop out a program that is designed to the empowerment of the next generation, to make highly intelligent and highly creative people. And they will create that new society for us, right? So I'm trying to think of where I was going with that. So I was going to say something about creativity, but
it'll come back. But I think it's so, what's so important is that, yes, if the children are looked after, nurtured, educated in a way that's very healthy, broad, it has structure, but it also has the freedom, the creativity as well. Yes, you're right. They will create the society of the future.
We'll see. And everybody knows that. That's why kids are marketed to. That's why kids are, what's it called? Not bred, but what do they call it when you're being?
I know.
Yeah, you know the word. It's like a trigger word, but the reason that's done is because they know they can create the society of control they want if they can target the next generation. So your children are being marketed to. Are you the ones marketing to them? That's where you take your power back as a parent.
Yeah.
That's why I from my perspective, wanted to create a system that became available to everybody, because then it breeds hope. And then what we can do is we can empower each person. When you take somebody out of the stress cycle, put them into the creative cycle, they'll create the environment they want. Yeah. Crime goes down because that scarcity mentality goes away. That's a huge factor. And then people work more harmoniously together, and you can actually think of real strategies and real solutions to issues, or just not even necessarily an issue, just what's the next level of development, because we're creative evolutionary beings, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also, I feel quite strongly that schools that really would work for people, and I've talked to a number of people about the schools that they're involved with, that emotional intelligence is a really important part of that. So, so not only do they have the mix of the structure and the creativity, which is fantastic, but they learn life skills and they learn emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence just because it's important to know how to function as emotional beings in the world we live in.
IQ and EQ. What I was going to say that came back to me is the US educational system has gone, like the US education on the global charts has gone down, way down. I don't even know where we're at right now. I'd have to look it up, but it was like below number 20. And that should say something to people that your program is obviously not working, because you're creating a bunch of people who don't know how to do it. Not only do they not have the life skills, now they're not even functioning on a level of intelligence anymore. They can't retain information, and the educational system has been dumbed down to a medium, hit the middle line. So then the super intelligent people are bored, and the people who maybe need more help are still struggling to keep up. And then it just becomes this average communist type education that's easily infiltrated or easily,
and it's also, I mean, the real high achievers, the ones who you're talking about, the super intelligent ones that you're talking about, the trouble is with that band of people at school is that what's the word? They tend to be very good students. They follow the party line. They follow what they're told, and then they go into the, in the US, they'll be going into Ivy League universities, they'll be going into the top universities, and then you have to follow again. There's lots of following. And I don't know about universities. Well, I do know about universities in the US. I think it's very similar, but universities over here, there is just a limit. You don't have free. You can't think freely. There are certain areas you just cannot go into. You can't explore and have free critical thinking. And I think that's very frightening.
It's almost become military in nature, where it's almost like the illusion of, yes, we want critical thinking people, but we want you to think critically the way we tell you to.
Well, that's the thing. And that in the last few years has got so extreme that all, people that I know, that I'm close to, who are good friends, who are highly educated, it is exactly that. I zip my mouth shut because I don't dare say, but hang on, there is actually another view. What about another view to this? I don't, they sort of look at me in absolute horror. How can there possibly be another view? And yet those are the very people that I went to university with, where we were encouraged to think critically and at least have an alternative view. I'm not saying I agree with an alternative view. I'm just saying, let's have one. Let's have a balance of views.
Yeah, exactly. Why would we not have options or room for growth? It's like there's no room for growth. And I'm all for high-level institutions. I was doing my application to MIT this year. I put it on hold because I'm launching the communities, I'm launching the corporation, but I will do my application next semester if that whole thing doesn't fall apart.
And what would you do? What would you be doing at MIT?
We're looking to go into computer science. I like computer science, mathematics, engineering, things of that nature, because we want to develop. One of the things that one of my biggest passions is use technology to get yourself back into nature. You know what I mean? Use these as tools to make your natural life. Don't demonize your natural life and consistently try to get more and more synthetic. That's the thing we're watching with things like metaverse or whatever, is moving into these fully digital environments.
Yeah.
That was what a thing behind that is pushing masses into a digital environment while all of the real resources are bought up. Because you're busy. And I'm not saying don't do it. There can be money to be made. You can still leverage the digital markets. But if all you're doing is buying digital land space, for example, and all the real land is being bought up, you still have to live somewhere. Your body has to live somewhere. So I started with the concept of the communities targeting real necessary assets: land, water, food, energy, financial system, to keep yourself insulated, but not in an isolated fashion like we've seen with these other cults, creating a new mentality and a new way we can do this so that the power can move back in the hands of the people. Once the power is back in the hands of the people, they will create the society together.
It is totally agree. And I think it's really interesting what you say about digital versus real. I mean sort of when you physically see another human being, when you physically go out into nature. We all discovered that in the last couple of years with these crazy lockdowns, where we haven't been able to see easily normal human beings and have normal human reactions, and lots of people with masks on and all of that kind of thing. And it just makes you realize that we are, as human beings, we need that kind of what I would call normality, the real side of things. I mean, today it's the bluebell time of the year in the UK at the moment, and it's sort of, the leaves are coming out in the trees, the spring flowers are absolutely all over the place, the blossoms coming out, and the woods are packed full with carpets of bluebells. I don't know whether you know bluebells, but they're just such beautiful, simple flowers. And there's a scent that comes. So I just went into the woods this afternoon and you could just smell this scent absolutely everywhere in this ancient woodland. It's beautiful.
Oh yeah.
And it sort of makes you realize that's what it's all about. You know, we need to get back to that.
Well, that's the thing. That's being in that balance. You move into a developmental mindset where you're progressing side, and then you go back into a restful and you relax and you enjoy your creation, right? You see that in all the creation stories.
Yeah.
You know, or the masculine versus the feminine, of action versus stillness, right?
Yeah.
And maintaining. That's why I suggest to people, without putting a religious connotation to it, read some of the ancient verses, you know, because now science is, or quantum physics is putting a reality to those words of what they were telling you back then. What they were saying, though, was written in a language, symbolic language to your subconscious. It was written in story fashion. The problem was that was then monopolized and utilized as a spiritual communization control method for people. So they monopolized your spirituality.
Okay, hang on a second. So are you talking specifically about the Bible? Or are you talking about myths or mythology? What are you talking about?
All of the myths say it, all the creation stories, Hinduism, Christianity for the Bible, Judaism, Buddhism.
So all the main religions basically have that symbolic language, you're saying?
Yeah, they're written in that way. These stories are written just like, you know, for people that read Joseph Campbell or Sigmund Freud or Carl Jung, like the archetypal relevance of those things. It's the language of your subconscious. But there's real scientific, and we'll call them spiritual, but just, you know, beyond the physical realm, the bigger whole, the quantum realm, real quantum truths written in those verses. Yeah. And quantum physics and science is just a language. It's almost like it's just a different language saying the same thing to you, presenting the same material, but that's how some people hear it, you know?
Yeah.
Mathematics, it's a language. It's a symbolic language to represent a form of order and structural creation. So when people can realize that that's what religions are, that it's all pointing you to the same unification, holistic whole, they're all saying the same thing. Where they deviate is probably where that control measure was put in, where it starts to become that isolated religious form. Yeah. So, and I'm sure that'll trigger some people, but I'm not here to tell you what or what not to believe. You know, I'm just saying, when you do a comparative study, you'll see a lot of comparisons that you're like, wow. And then you'll see beauty in the other cultural aspects, or you may ascribe to something, or, you know, be more drawn to another cultural aspect. And I don't want to lose that. When something becomes one religion or one culture, that's communism. You lose the diversity and creativity of the world.
And that's where you go back to wanting to come. That's another way of saying centralization, isn't it? So it's why it's so important to actually come away from what could be actually incredibly dangerous. And decentralization is the way to go for that very reason, isn't it?
I really think that those, like, if we're talking about God or whatever people want to say about that, you know, the universal mind, the universe will speak, you're connected to it. No matter what, you couldn't exist if you weren't. You live in the unified whole. So that knows you, your subconscious knows you. That will reach to you in whatever way you're receptive to. That may be Christianity for some people, which is why I'm not saying to not do it. What I'm just saying is be a little more open that there may be other people are receiving that message of love to their neighbor or whatever, right? In a different fashion that speaks to them because of their cultural background or because of many various reasons, you know. I don't know what the different reasons are, but I think it's beautiful to have all those different options. And that's the same thing we were talking about in the educational program. Yeah. And the idea of the communities is it is not a utopian mindset. I'm not telling this is how we have to live. This is how no, all it's being done is giving people an option of clean food, clean water, clean energy, decentralized in fashion, put the control back in your hands so you're not reliant upon governments. Then you make the decisions. Society will develop itself.
Yeah, it's, I mean,
It stops from being
well,
fed.
it's so important. And I just, it's so much what we need. I actually wonder how many of us really are aware that we're not eating clean food and we don't have clean water running out of the taps. I mean, I've
It's
just sort of
hard.
recently got a really high grade water filter, and
Mhm.
they had this sort of measuring system where if you sort of put the monitor in your tap water, I'm afraid I can't actually, I don't know how to measure it, but I do know that 0 is good and anything up in the hundreds is not good. That's all I can say. And my water is 282 from the tap. London water is 400. Some places out in the countryside are more like 100, and
Okay.
this water filter takes it to 0, so it clears all the sort of sediments and all the gunk out of it. But I'm unusual. I mean, yes, some people do have water filters, but not many treat it quite as seriously as I do.
You are 70% water, right? Maybe that's numbers a little bit, whatever, kind of averaging there, but about 70% water. So that is a big
Yeah,
component of your system and your functionality. So
yeah,
changing that to a cleaner level, you're going to see improvements from there. So water is the beginning. From there, change your food as best as you can. This is so right now, it is hard for people to do it. They're like, I don't know how to do it, or I can't afford that. So that is why I really sat down and thought about how can we do this to make that available to everybody.
yeah.
I have a Kangen water machine. It's like a pH scale water machine. But those are super expensive.
Yeah.
That's a very expensive machine. And I want to, one of the things that we want to do is our water machines that we sell, which pull the water from the moisture in the air. So you're not connected to any central supply.
Oh, great.
Filtered to purified, hydrolyzed, mineralized, drinkable water. And they have, little filters in there and mineral cubes or whatever. I want to put those into each house. So when you buy a house on the property, that is built into the overhead of the house. The water machine comes with it.
Fantastic. What about energy? What about heating and all those things?
So our go-to right now is solar panels. We have different companies we're working with. One of them, you can literally have the solar panels on your windows. They're like window panels. So, and there's like, I'm not saying like you take a solar panel and you put it on your window, like it's actual, they're utilizing windows as solar generators, which is really cool because one
Yeah,
of the biggest things is people don't like them on their roofs. So,
yeah,
developing that technology, you cannot centralize. Well, you can, but you also can't, because if you have your own battery generators, they cannot centralize your solar energy. You produce for yourself from the sun. They can't control it. You put into your own batteries. You can literally disconnect from the grid. You
yeah.
can disconnect yourself from
Yeah, sounds so good. Sounds so good. Yeah, I mean, this is what we need, and we really need this kind of thing. So
yeah.
keep going. What's next? What's your next step?
So partnering with our landowner to get this community model launched. I'm going to an investors meeting this weekend in Vegas to pitch the idea again. We've done a few of these investor meetings. We do have investors on board, but still getting the idea out there. As soon as we launch that first community, we start breaking dirt, building the houses. I'm setting up a TED talk, and
Great.
I'm going to pitch the idea on a large scale once we actually have equity in the project. From there, we finish building out the scalability franchise model that can be applied to each location, right? Northern states, red versus blue states, different zonings. We have to put all that in there. Then when we launch global, because that's the next move, local, national, global, then we start working with other countries. We're going to change. But the thing is, the coolest thing is these are economic producers. So we are producing for the economy. You know what I mean? We're not making
Absolutely.
a facade of production. We're actually producing, we're utilizing our assets and our resources, and we're producing real necessities for humanity all over the world that everybody needs. So if we change the way we do it, then the whole power structure, the whole power dynamic goes back into the hands of the people. And that's the model it's being built on.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up? Any sort of little kind of gems of inspiration you want to sort of get out there?
What I've been saying to people is, so this is my method of you know what I mean? Like I sat down, this was my idea, and people are jumping on board, people are excited. Sit down and talk to whoever you talk to and figure out what your passions are. You'll know, what is my life purpose? What is my this? What is my, I don't know. What are you passionate about? Sit down, think about it, write it down, start putting action to that. Faith without works is dead. You have the idea now. Good. Step one complete. Put action behind that. Take a step. This company, when it goes big, when we have our communities, I want to create pooling funds so that we can put capital into people in the community's ideas. You set up an invention. We promote it for you. You know what I mean? Your community stands behind you, as opposed to you trying to launch it through all these avenues and then it gets shelved because they can't figure out a way to monetize it to their speculations or whatever. They can't find a way, or it might decentralize it too much to where there's no level of control they can maintain. So the communities will always support the communities, but they'll never isolate you from the outside environment. It's always a choice. Everything's a choice. Maintaining freedom of choice whilst protecting people. So that would be my final thing. Focus on positivity. It's like if you most people, if you've ever like watched a scary movie at night, it's a form of entertainment. Some people like being on the edge of their seat, but then before you go to sleep, you got to watch a comedy because you don't want to be having nightmares. So if you're going to dose yourself right with a little bit of negativity and to give context to the problem, dude, that's 1/3 of the time. 2/3 of the time is strategizing your solution and networking with people.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I really, really wish you all the best. I think it's such a good idea, and I'm sure it's going to have traction and go places, which is fantastic because that's what we need in the world at the moment. It's great, man. Thanks so much. I really, really enjoyed talking to you today. Thank you.
You too. Bye.